You're listening to the Jake Asman Show on the SportsMap Radio Network.
Presented by Rocket Mortgage.
Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Jake Asman.
Let's get the local perspective on what the heck is going on in Seattle right now with the Seahawks and Russell Wilson. For that, we go out to our progressive guest line. Right now, we bring on a good friend of this show and a good friend of mine. He is Paul Gallant. He hosts the Morning Drive Show on 710 ESPN Radio in Seattle, and he's kind enough to join us here on the Jake Asman Show. Paul, I hope you're well, man. Thanks for coming on.
Jake, always a pleasure. Hope you're doing the same.
I'm hanging in, man. I know you know the city of Houston well. I have my hot water back. I got my power back, so we're doing okay here. We missed you, though.
I saw that. It looked like it was an absolutely miserable experience in classic Texas fashion. Didn't it go back to like 80 degrees within the next week?
Yep. It was in the 70s all week here. So
that's incredible.
Yep. So, and by the way, it's pretty funny, right? So the saying here for years has been, "Oh, Houston strong." Well, I'm just arguing, can we just be like Houston prepared for once? I mean, my goodness.
I know, man. Looking from afar, some of the stuff y'all had to go through. I'm glad I didn't have to, but I guess I'm sort of dealing with it in my own way, seeing as the Seahawks have turned into a soap opera despite being 12-4 and winning the NFC West last year.
Yes, you guys are very similar to what's happening, of course, with the Texans and Deshaun Watson, it seems. So let's obviously start with what's going on with Russell Wilson. After reading the report from The Athletic, Paul, what were your big takeaways? What's the latest in your mind with Russell Wilson and the Seahawks?
Jake, I'm tired of the whole thing, man. I'm just tired of it. I mean, you made the comparison just a moment ago. Like, it's sort of similar between Houston, the Texans, and the Seahawks, and it shouldn't be that way. And for Russ, I understand that he wants to have some of the same powers that maybe NBA superstar players have, and he has a very high sense of himself, and the way that he feels that he's gone about things in the past hasn't worked for him. He does have a valid gripe about the offensive line and the protection. He does, I think, perhaps have some valid gripes, maybe asking for more weapons. I think that the Antonio Brown conversation is always a difficult one to have because I think he's a despicable person. But at the same time, you realize how talented he is. And Russell Wilson really wanted to have Antonio Brown. So he has been asking for a lot over the last year, and he has not been perhaps as timid isn't the right word, but careful as far as trying to make sure that there's no way anyone's going to take a look at it and see it in the wrong light. But at the same time, he has been pushing a little more, and there has been some pushback. And I'm part of that pushback because, look, I get he wants a better offensive line. But last year, the offensive line improved. It got better. And when you also take a look at some of the things that he has asked for, he wanted superstar players. The Seahawks traded 2 first-round picks to get a guy that they at least viewed as a superstar defensively to go aboard that defense, which had struggled so much. So I think he's asking for a lot, and you see some of the things that he took issue with in that Athletic piece, whether it's not being taken seriously after he came to them with some ideas for the offense. I mean, Russ had thrown and turned the football over 7 times in the 2 weeks. Timing-wise, you couldn't have picked the worst time to come up to the coach and say, "Hey, I've got some ideas." Hey, man, you just set the house on fire in back-to-back games. How much trust are they actually going to have for you in that situation? So there are some things that I can maybe understand why he took issue with, like the Seahawks going and taking a look at Josh Allen at his pro day in 2018, even though Russ was not even 30 years old yet at that point. It's a little different than seeing, that happened maybe with Peyton Manning in his late 30s or Tom Brady. He has some valid gripes. I just think he's going about this in a way that's not productive for the Seahawks. He's basically saying, you haven't done enough for me, and you need to be better. Great. Thanks for telling us we need to be better. I think the Seahawks realize that.
Paul Gallant from ESPN Radio in Seattle, the co-host of Danny and Gallant Mornings from 7 to 10 a.m. Pacific time with us here. What's your takeaway on the fact that his agent comes out and said, "Oh, no, Russ doesn't want to be traded, but if he were to be traded, here are the 4 teams he'd waive the no-trade clause to"?
I laughed really hard. And Mark Rogers, for those who don't know, is his agent. He is a agent with baseball background predominantly. So he's a little bit, I think, more hard line than you maybe see some other NFL agents. And this is his only NFL client, Russell Wilson, too. So there's that element about it as well. I saw that and I laughed. I mean, the idea that he did not reach out to the Seahawks with some sort of idea of perhaps like where he would go if his demands aren't met. I feel like there was some reaching out, and this is, I guess, Mark Rogers trying his best to do damage control, even though he's created a lot of his damage. And I just thought it was funny yesterday. Russ puts out this tweet, and it's all fuel, and he's like working out. And I just started thinking to myself, oh, it's all fuel. Well, I mean, you spilled a bunch of fuel all over the floor, man. So, I mean, all the fuel that you are, I guess, motivating yourself with is fuel that you've created, fuel that you are wasting. So that's neat.
It's just so weird, Paul, because I talked about this earlier in the show. He's kind of acting, Russell Wilson is that he's half pregnant, right? Like you're either pregnant or you're not. You either want to be traded or you don't. Like, is he going to continue with this passive aggressive stuff throughout the offseason?
I hope to God not, Jake. I mean, I guess it's good for me, right? Like from a content perspective, just looking at it exclusively as a sports talk show host. Yep. But I don't think that right now is the time to do it. I feel like if the Seahawks hadn't done anything in free agency, which by the way hasn't even started yet, or don't do anything in the draft to address the offensive line, I would get it. But I guess Russ is just looking at the last 4 to 5 years, and he thinks that by being public right now that the Seahawks are going to listen to him and perhaps do what he asks. But I mean, what is it that he wants them to do? You want the offensive line to get better. I think anyone who's followed football knows that you're going to be hard-pressed to totally fix an offensive line in one offseason. And how do you expect them to do it? You're going to do it through the draft. That's going to be hard because they don't have a first or a third round pick because of the Jamal Adams trade. You have a late second round pick. Okay, well, you might find a guard there. You got lucky this past year in finding Damian Lewis in the third round, who steps in and starts at right guard and had a pretty good season. But are you going to just make sure that the Seahawks make some sort of a big purchase in free agency on the offensive line? That might work out. You saw it with Jack Conklin this past offseason with the Cleveland Browns. That offensive line seems to have taken a big step in the right direction. But you've also seen over the last couple of seasons offensive linemen like Nate Solder get big contracts from the Giants. I think most Giants fans would say that has not worked out for them. You've seen big contracts given out to Trent Brown. First year, it works out great for Las Vegas. And then the second year, and he's not playing at all. He's opting out for COVID and real reasons to actually opt out. But then Andrew Norwell in Jacksonville. That guy signed to a huge deal as an interior offensive lineman. What has that actually done for them? Not a whole lot. So I don't know what he thinks is the next step here and what he can actually accomplish by being this open. And I'm not telling him to not talk like a lot of people are. And I do think it's interesting to see the way that he's going about it. I'm just saying, if you're going to have I don't know if it's a hissy fit, but if you're going to basically go all Veruca Salt and say, I want it now, and list a bunch of different things, then you need to have, I think, a realistic solution of going about and doing it. And maybe he's had those solutions in private conversations with the Seahawks, but right now it doesn't even feel like those two sides are talking. It feels like Russ is just saying, hey, I want this, I want this. Hey, mama, me, mama, like he's Stewie with Lois. And by the time the Seahawks and Lois turn around and they're like, what? He's just going to be like, have you done anything? Anything? So that's where I'm at with all this, at least, Jake.
Paul Gallant, ESPN Radio in Seattle, with us here. If it gets to a point, Paul, where Russ goes out and says, I want to be traded, he pulls to Deshaun Watson, officially makes the trade request, does Seattle entertain it? I mean, is there any scenario where they actually would move on from him? I read that it'd be like a $39 million dead cap charge. It'd be the highest in league history. Do you see any scenario where he's not playing quarterback for Seattle next year?
I'd be shocked. I mean, if he put together a manifesto that said bleep the Seahawks hundreds of times, even then, I don't know if they would do it. And here's the other thing too. Russ is never going to, I think, go full out publicly and ask this because he wants people to, I think, view him in a specific way. And I think Ryan Russillo described it as he's going to ask for it nicely and keep asking for it nicely, even if he does. He's not getting traded this year. I mean, you're seeing it in Houston right now. The Texans, it looks like that's actually a bad situation for Deshaun Watson. And they're still saying, yeah, we're not trading him. So that's that situation. The Seahawks were 12-4 last year, and they won the NFC West. And as long as Russ is playing at a plus level and as one of the best 10, if not 5, if not 3 bit quarterbacks in the NFL, then they're going to keep him and they're going to hold on to him because you're not going to get anything back close to what Russell Wilson is in return in a trade. So yeah, even if he were to go out of character, Jake, and demand a trade, I see no way that Seattle allows that to happen.
Paul, how do people in Seattle a year after the trade view the Jamal Adams deal now? Because I can tell you, with the Jet fan perspective, people celebrate it. It's the greatest thing ever. We love the fact that we have the pick this year and the next year. And I think nationally people have come around on it as well. Have Seahawks fans turned on Jamal Adams at all? How is that going over in Seattle?
there's no reason to. And look, Jake, I know you have a Jets background, and I have a Patriots background. So there's always going to be a little bit of, I think, a healthy back and forth here. You guys got way too excited about the draft picks that you got in exchange for that. And we'll see what Joe Douglas does. Joe Douglas does seem confident. So we'll see what he's able to do with those picks. Mekhi Becton, he looks like a really good player. So, I think there's reason to have faith in Joe Douglas. We'll see about Woody Johnson now that he's back from, overseas, if he's going to ruin everything like he did before.
He's had some great tweets lately. I don't know if you've seen it. He's got the PR staff working overtime.
Oh, boy. Well, I mean, on brand. Look, Jamal Adams changed this defense. And I think the way that we look at safety, it's totally subjective. It's eye of the beholder, right? I mean, we both saw Tyrann Mathieu firsthand with the Houston Texans, and he wasn't really good, but then he goes to the Chiefs, and he's like this totally different player that I think was a lot closer to what we saw out of him in Arizona. Adams, when healthy, and it wasn't often that he was healthy this past season, but when he was healthy, he was a real game changer. The Seahawks had zero pass rush to speak of last year, and take a look at where the pass rush is this year. And Jamal Adams is a big part of that as far as this change in the sack numbers. And he takes issue, I think, wrongly so, with people calling him blitz boy. He's so good at blitzing. I don't think he should take issue with that. He's not great in coverage. And you guys knew that, and we've seen it this year. I don't think he's bad necessarily in coverage, but there were a couple of moments in that game against the Rams where I wonder if he had a better shoulder, if he would have been able to make plays, because there were two plays I think that he could have made. He has made this defense better. Did they give up too much for him? I think that's a strong argument that you can make. They were desperate to get defensive talent, though. So I think people here in Seattle actually really like what they've gotten out of Jamal Adams. They might be a little bummed out with the way that the playoff game went, but I mean, he played that game with a torn labrum. So it is in the eye of the beholder. I understand, too, why Jets fans would be celebrating, because this is a guy who seemed unhappy, and the Jets were able to get a pretty good haul for a guy that basically seemed like he had submarined all of their leverage. So, I think it's been good for Seattle. I feel like he is clearly the guy that's going to be the centerpiece of their defense in a post-Bobby Wagner world, whenever that begins. And I'm glad that they have him, to be perfectly honest.
So is a long-term extension to Jamal coming soon? Because, of course, a big reason why he wanted out from the Jets is that the Jets would not give him the extension, making him the highest-paid player on the team.
But I have a question for you on that. Do you think it was just that? Because I know that he's talked about this publicly, and what you say publicly versus your actual inner thoughts, there's a total difference on that side of things. But I know in a podcast he was saying that no, it wasn't that. It was I was playing for a bad team and I wanted respect. I actually don't know at this point in time, like how the contract situation is going between these two sides. I do think it makes a lot of sense for Seattle to extend them and push some money down the road to create some cap space for them this offseason. But I think there was a little more to it going on in New York. Some of it, I think Jamal Adams was being a little bit of a diva on that side of things. But honestly, if we're learning anything from the athlete empowerment era, if you're being a diva, you're generally going to get what you want. We'll see if he gets that long-term contract. I feel like he can ask for more perhaps than most safeties, just given that he can point to the sack numbers that he has. And he's like, I am a one-of-a-kind safety. I mean, literally, he is. He had 9.5 sacks in 12 games. So I'm curious as to that. The funny thing is, no one's talking about that at all with everything that's been going on with Russell Wilson. But that is something they need to take care of as soon as they possibly can.
Right. And a big reason was him not getting paid. And just, I think Jet fans just turned on Jamal because he talks out of both sides of his mouth. You know, when the Jets finished 6-2 in the second half last year, he was all in on Adam Gase and he was all excited about the future. And then when he started to not get his money, did it all of a sudden become a problem? Then he leaks to Manish Mehta at the time of the Daily News how unhappy he is with Gase when he had nothing but good things to say about Gase at the end. So I think that was a big reason why. But you make a good point. They're going to have to pay him because they gave up a fortune to get him, right?
Right, exactly. You're in that situation. And if you don't give him a long-term extension, then it's not just an element of, all right, you're losing an asset potentially for nothing, although you might get a compensatory third-round pay. There is an element of you might look bad. But I feel like John Schneider's going to get it done. I think he's one of the better general managers in the NFL. And I feel that the deal, if it does happen, maybe takes place in August. I would hope that it would take place sooner than that, though, because I do feel like it could help them out in the short term. This is such a weird year with the salary cap shrinking and free agency. We're about to see potentially, I wonder, Jake, if we're going to see some of the same things that we have seen out of baseball the last couple of years where owners and stuff start colluding with one another and saying, hey, well, these veterans, we're going to use this as an opportunity to perhaps drive prices down at least for one off season. We did see that sort of to an extent in baseball, and Yeah, it's tough. It's going to be really tough for a lot of, I think, good teams that are in the Seahawks shoes that don't have a lot of draft capital to improve themselves this offseason.
Paul, great stuff, my friend. I hope you're well out in Seattle. Appreciate you making some time for us, and we'll definitely be tuned into your show Monday through Friday, 7 to 10 a.m. Pacific time on 710 ESPN Seattle.
I appreciate the plug, Jake. Anytime you need me, you know I will be there. You have yourself a wonderful rest of your show and weekend, man.
The great Paul Gallant with us there on the Progressive Guest Line. We'll take a quick break because we're up against it. He joined us on our Progressive Guest Line. Reminder, drivers who save with Progressive save over $750 on average.
Wake up call. Jamaica is entering into a marijuana shortage.
No.
Yeah.
That can't possibly happen.
What else do you go to Jamaica for? Just white sandy beaches? You can get that at any island, really.
Right. It's like a lot of 20-year-olds going out to Colorado for the mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Come on.
Over the last 10 years. I really want to get together with nature.